You thought I had retired. You thought I had stopped YouTubing. Well, you are wrong. For I am the one you have admired. I am the backwoods samurai with his face revealed. I am now outlaw samurai. But this will not change my show's dynamics. And in true backwoods fashion, I have a new intro. Welcome, my noble band of outlaws, to your Outlaw Samurai channel. My first video, I thought, would be kind of a video on the anime Goblin Slayer. Now, if any of you have seen Goblin Slayer, you know what I'm about to talk about. No, it's not the goblins and their activities, but it's about the main character, whose name is Goblin Slayer. Now, in the world of Goblin Slayer, the main character, which is also his name, he's a knight, dressed head to toe in armor. And here's the thing. Goblin Slayer answers a question we in the anime and fantasy community have long since had on our minds. How do goblins reproduce? I mean, you ever seen Lord of the Rings or Hobbit or any other fantasy genre? You never see a female goblin. They're all male. And this answers the question. Because Goblin Slayer shows us what happens when the bad guys win. It ain't pretty. First episode. Basically what happens is, goblins go to village, goblins take over village, goblins kidnap women, goblins, well, impregnate women forcibly, and then goblin babies are born. And in Goblin Slayer, you never see we see babies in the first, we see goblin infants in the first episode. But then Goblin Slayer goes and beats them to death with a club, which is always awesome to watch. It's like, whenever you see a massive guy in armor just beating to death every creature he sees, even infants, that you know he's a badass, okay? He ain't taking no shit. But, in any case, he's decked head to toe in armor. But what I really wanted to talk about was why people seem to think goblins are so damn easy to kill. I mean, if you read the manga, which, by the way, the anime is a lot more tame than the manga, so you know what that's going to lead to. If you watch the anime, we only get one scene of where the goblins forcibly take a woman. And that's in the first episode. We only see her face, so it's not too bad. In the manga, you actually see everything. To an extent. But, in any case, Goblin Slayer is an anime that's a dark fantasy, so it's not really something you want to let little kids watch. It's more aimed to older, more D&D, Dungeons and Dragons fans. Because it introduced Dungeons and Dragons elements into the anime, and it has them in the manga. But, the way Goblin Slayer works is, it starts out with this priestess. She goes and joins this band of adventurers. You have the cocky swordsman, the female Shaolin martial artist, the wizard with the pointy hat, and then you have this priestess with the miracles of Earth Mothers and such and so. And they go into the cave, and they start to fight the goblins. Now they start doing fairly decently. However, it starts out with the wizard chick firing arrows made of fire, then getting stabbed. Then the sword guy, which he is completely improperly armed, but I'll get to that in a minute. He comes around, starts swinging his sword like an idiot in a confined space, because he's using a longsword. He hits the sword off of a stalactite, and loses it, and then gets ripped to shreds by the goblins. Then, the female martial artist is the, well, one we see get the unpleasant, angry avocado love, Deadpool. But, she's getting that, and the priestess is just standing over there, terrified out of her mind, trying to get the girl wizard to safety. But in any case, they thought goblins would be easy, because apparently this cocky swordsman is like, oh, I'm so big and strong, I killed a goblin that was attacking, that wandered into my village, and they're really easy to kill. I want to emphasize one thing. Goblins are easy to kill only, and I mean only, if there are 1 or 2 of them. Maximum 5. Because in a small little group like that, yeah, you're going to have a lot of luck killing them. Because goblins have basically the intelligence and body size of a human child. So they're not completely dumb, but they're not completely ignorant. So they're not overly intelligent and they're not overly dumb. They're middle intelligence. But in any case, small groups, and if you are skilled, maybe you could kill 10 goblins without getting injured. Minimum. Maximum 10. Minimum 1. Somewhere in that region. But any higher than that, you're screwed. And these guys, they go into the cave completely ill-equipped. I mean, the guy has only a longsword, no armor. The Kung Fu Shaolin girl has only hand-to-hand combat, no melee weapon, no backup weapon. The wizard chick, well, she's a wizard, so you'd assume she'd have that covered. Wrong! She's the first one to get killed by a poison dagger. And then the priestess, she's just scared shitless at this point. But in any case, I want to really emphasize the swordsman. Alright, because he looked to me to be about 5'6", a standard height for most male adolescents in teenage years. But in any case, I'm going to say 5'6", so probably about here on me, because I'm basically 6 feet tall. I'm 5'11" and a half. But basically about 6 inches shorter than me. And okay, so has only a long sword. I keep bringing this back because it's a very important thing that I have to point out. Now, the cave looked to me to be about maybe 10 by 10, a 10 by 10 circle or square, whichever you'd like. If it's a square, you might get a few more inches of leeway, but it's a circle, because cave's round. But in any case, he's in the cave, and he's swinging around, and already, I mean, this sword that I practice with, this Tachi sword, it's over 5 feet. It's 51 inches long, so about 3 inches shy of a standard longsword length, where most longswords were around 54 inches long. Very thin tapered blades, but that's besides the point. Alright, so he's swinging this thing around, and this room is I'm standing in, is a 10 by 10 square. And, as you can see, I don't have a lot of room to really swing this thing around as freely as I would want. Because, again, I'm in a confined space. And he didn't think of that. Goblins in most animes, sorry, my neighbors are riding their dirt bikes, but goblins in most animes and mangas and fantasies, they tend to live in caves, and they tend to live in old ruins. And unless you're in The Hobbit, where it's this giant, hollowed out cave cavern, which 90% of the time you're not going to find yourself in. But still, if you're in the Hobbit and you have all those giant cave, cavern things, then yeah, you can swing a sword around as much as you want, because till you get into like the tunnel networks, you're not going to be hindered by anything except by the hordes of goblins you're cutting through. But in any case, the goblins, adventurers in a lot of MMORPG games, fantasy games, Dungeons and Dragons even, they don't really see goblins as a threat because of how weak they are. Goblins can be just as threatening as an ogre or a troll, and here's why. You are fighting multiple numbers in a small confined space, and this is where his choice of weapon leaves much to be desired. In fact, I would think the Kung Fu chick, if she had just brought like a couple of butterfly knives with her, or a couple of daggers, she would have been doing a lot better than the Longsword guy. We're just going to call him Longsword guy from now on. So Longsword guy, he's fighting, and he even almost cuts the Kung Fu girl's, like, head off, or cuts her with the sword, because he's just flailing it around like an idiot. And then he again hits the stalactite, and gets torn to shreds. Here's what he did wrong. He was not prepared, okay? Even in RPG games and online computer games, you need to be prepared for the creature you're going to fight. For example, let's say you're going to go fight a troll or an ogre. We'll say ogre. Now, an ogre, they generally live in forests and swamps. Now, let's say you're going to fight the forest ogre. Okay, what will you need? Well, first, you'll need armor. Full plate armor. If you can't afford it, Chainmail and Gambeson. Now, here's how armor usually goes from tier to bottom. In real world, full plate armor is the best. European knight armor, Japanese samurai armor, hell, even Roman centurion armor. Any kind of full metal plate or chainmail will be perfect. And if you can't afford full plate, you get chainmail. Now, you want to cover yourself head to toe in chainmail. I'm talking chainmail pants, chainmail shirt, chainmail mittens, chainmail hood, a helmet. But chainmail alone won't cut it. You also need an armor called Gambeson. And essentially what Gambeson is quite simple. Got a knife here. Got a piece of paper. Now, Gambeson is like paper. I'm going to see how easy it is for me to tear or cut through one little 2-ply piece of paper. Watch what happens when I fold it up and layer it. A lot harder for me to actually get through. See? It's a lot thicker. Same with Gambeson. Gambeson is linen, or in some cases, I guess, leather armor, where you have layer upon layer upon layer of interweaving linens or cloth. So you could have one layer going up and down, one layer going across, one layer going like this, and one layer going like that. And if you do that, you are essentially making cloth chainmail, okay? Gambeson is good armor, okay? It was used long before chainmail was invented. And when you put properly made chainmail over Gambeson, I'm sorry, there is no way you're getting through that unless you have a specifically designed sword that is capable of getting through Gambeson. There's no way a goblin is going to be able to bite through that. There's no way a goblin is going to be able to get through that easily. Because they used Gambeson and chainmail combined for 2,000 years, roughly, back in the day. Back before the Middle Ages and 14th century plate armor. Pre-14th century, the go-to armor for peasants and people who couldn't afford to buy full plate because they had full plate armor by the 13th century, it was just very expensive. Later on, it became cheaper by the 14th and 15th century, but pre-14th and 15th century, chainmail and Gambeson was the best armor you could get. If you were a peasant, or if you were a business owner. I mean, even, I think the Metatron said this, or Shadowversity, or Scalagrim, 3 very good YouTubers on these subjects. They even said that a tailor from the 1400s, if he were to shave up a year's salary, could buy a full plate of armor. Could buy a full suit of plate armor. And plate armor is the best, but Chainmail and Gambeson is also extremely good. And very well constructed, properly made chainmail. You can't even fit a hyperbolic needle through the interlocking rings. And we're not talking about butted mail like you get in costume shops or you use for LARP or cosplay. We're talking riveted, interlocking steel rings. And you might be thinking, well, that's going to be heavy as hell. No. Because you can get a full chainmail tunic that goes from your neck down to your knees. And all you gotta do is put a belt around your waist. And that will completely take care of all the weight distribution. It will distribute the weight evenly between your lower and upper torso. You'll also want to wear Gambeson pants, and in some cases even chainmail pants if you could get someone to make them for you. Thick leather boots, chainmail covered. You want to also cover your hands in chainmail. You want as much as your body covered in this stuff as possible so that you are not injured as easily. Now, granted, full plate armor, again, better, but still chainmail will be perfectly fine for what you're fighting. Alright, so after you get the chainmail and all that good stuff, your weaponry. Now again, we're fighting the forest ogre. So I got my armor, I got my Gambeson, my chainmail and all that. What else do I need? Alright, if I'm going to fight an ogre, I'm going to want a few different weapons. I'm going to want a polearm, for example. And I have my choice of spear, pike, or halberd, or even war axe, or a war hammer that had a spear and a spike on it. Now, for simplicity's sake, we're going to say, okay, I'm going to take the halberd. It has a spear, an axe, and a spike at the back. And it's long enough that I can just attack the ogre and not have to get too close. Now, my backup weapon, my sidearm. What do I want? Naturally, I'm going to want some sort of sword. Now, if I'm using a two-handed sword, if I'm using a two-handed polearm, logic would probably dictate that if my polearm breaks, I want to grab a two-handed sword. No. What you'd want to grab if your polearm broke would probably be a two-handed sword. But I would say a one-handed arming sword would do you fine because of the third choice of weapon that you most likely will want to take. A shield. Yes, a shield will be perfect in all kinds of defensive situations. And there are different types of shields. There's the classic heater shield, which has a shape of like that. Classic knight shield that we see in a lot of animes. Of course, that shield was designed to accompany full plate armor if the knight wanted a little extra protection. What you would want, and these are modern terms for the shields. Back in the day, they would just call it shield, or a heater shield, or in this, what I'm about to say, a kite shield, which is essentially shaped like a raindrop. And the kite shield covers your whole body, your head, down to your knees, sometimes your calves, your whole torso. Imagine a shield in front of me that I grip right here, and a brace is up against my arm, and you couldn't see me, okay? I'm completely covered by the shield. That is the benefit you get from the kite shield. A shield that covers your whole body, alright? Now, generally speaking, if you're taking the polearm, then where are you going to carry the shield? Well, here's where a lot of interesting things come in handy. You could attach straps to the shield, Alright? One strap at the top, one strap at the bottom, and attach it like that. And buckle it to your back. That way you can also just, if it has enough tension, slip the polearm back there. And you can carry the sword. Or, I would see that would be the best way to do it. Because afterwards, you can just unbuckle the shield, drop it, and it's like you could just pull the polearm out of the back and start packing at it. And if the polearm breaks, or the ogre gets its hands on the polearm and he snaps it, what are you going to do? Unbuckle the, get some distance, run away from the thing, unbuckle the shield, take the straps off. You have the shield in hand, draw the sword. It was like, got the shield, you draw the sword, and then you can fight the ogre and use the shield to kind of bounce off his blows. And most of the time in fantasies, ogres use big clubs that they just basically break a tree and start swinging around like a club. So you could actually set your shield at an angle. And my sword was a club. You could actually, since they're both round objects, they'll have a tendency to slide off of each other. So you could probably deflect the blow from the ogre using the shield, and then stab at his arms or other such things. Now, you also want to know of the knowledge where you're going to attack. Now, let's say you don't have either the shield or the pike anymore. The ogre destroyed it, or you didn't even bring it. The best weapon you want to take against something that big would be a war sword. And a war sword is a bigger, beefier version of a longsword. Not quite a great sword, and it's in between the length and classification of a longsword and a war sword. A war sword is the longest type of longsword you can have before it falls into the category of great sword. And a war sword would be the best weapon to use against them. Now, generally, ogres are big and they're slow. This is a granted fact, and in a lot of anime and RPGs that they're big and slow. But if they hit you, and this is a big if, they hit you, you can most likely die. Now, what you want to do is, you want to use your speed and the fact that you're in open terrain to your advantage. Don't be afraid to close the distance if you can manage to get behind the thing. Slash at its knee joints. Slash at the Achilles tendons. Slash at the calves. All these things, because ogres are generally bigger and taller than you. You need to attack what you can. And that means you need to slash at the ligaments. That means if he, drops his arm down, slash at the elbow joints. Slash at the arms. Slash at the sides. Don't be afraid to charge in and attack if you know how to avoid the ogre's attack. If you know how to avoid and dodge and use a sword properly, you can a single person can bring an ogre down. But aim for the ligaments. Sure, ligaments are tough tissue, but if you manage to cut them, the ogre won't be able to move. Especially the Achilles tendon and the tendons in the knees. These are crucial parts of the body that if you hit them, they will go down and they will not be able to get back up. And then you can worry about doing the whole badass jump off of a rock and stab him in the back with a sword or something like that. You need to think practical when you're facing against these anime and fantasy creatures. Which brings me back to Goblin Slayer. Alright, this guy was not thinking practically. He's like, goblins are weak. What's there a plan for? Well, first of all, goblins are like wolves. Or, I guess in this case, hyenas. They live in packs. Okay? They live in hordes. Which means, rarely are you ever going to find one goblin where there's not 10 or 20 more goblins waiting behind it. The only time you're ever going to find a lone goblin is when they are weak, or they just survived a battle, or they are trying to find their way home. Goblins who are alone are usually the ones who just survived a massive attack on their hordes. And they're looking to start a new horde. In any case, back onto this topic, this guy was not prepared. He went into a cave where goblins most naturally find to be good, hospitable habitats. They have excellent night vision. Well, in any case, if he had really wanted to go into a cave where, alright, so let's say all I have is a longsword. You could actually use a longsword in a condensed situation. It's just you'd have to change it up a bit. Half stroking is a good move if you have to deal with like 1 or 2 goblins. Half swording is where you grab the base of the sword and a part of the blade and you can stab, generating more power. This historically was used against people in full plate armor to deliver the power necessary to pierce the chainmail and get between the Gambeson underneath the armpits. Because in full plate armor, really the only places that you could actually hit that would potentially kill the knight or whoever is wearing it is under the armpits, the inside of the shoulders, basically wherever there is hinged movement, where full plate cannot be placed. And you have to be able to fully move your arms, so there's no... So full plate armor usually only comes up to about here, usually. Right under the pectoral muscle on a man. Like right here is where your pectoral muscles are. And that's usually where armor starts to stop. But in any case, he goes in without any preparation. So, he could have half-sworded a few of the goblins, or even did a murder stroke. And what the murder stroke is you take your hands, being careful not to cut yourself with the blade. You have to learn to specially grip the sword, but if you know how to do this, you can even, in some cases, the murder stroke has even pierced metal armor, helmets and stuff. Because, again, it's all about surface area. There's a lot of math in swordsmanship, okay? And the less surface area you have, the more powerful the cut. That is why pikes, halberds, warhammers, these were all called anti-armor weapons. Very low surface area, all concentrating that force on one point. That's why arrows pierce so good, especially a bodkin kip arrow. That's why they were designed to pierce armor, to get through that armor. But in any case, goblins usually don't wear armor, so you really don't have to worry about that. You are the one who has to worry about wearing armor, okay? So this guy, there are definitely a few techniques you can use if you only have a longsword. And there's also a way you could use a longsword where you don't have to worry about being in a confined space. Because you have very limited room to swing it up, down, right, left, diagonals. Those are very limited ways you could swing it. But did you notice something? Where the one spot where I have plenty of room to swing is directly in front of me. I could thrust. I could do a lot of thrusting with a sword. Yes, longswords are most longswords, once you get from a type 8 all the way up, are very thrust-oriented. A thrust-oriented longsword, which isn't what he's using more of a cutting-oriented longsword, but still, a thrust-oriented longsword could actually do very well in that situation. Now, a lot of sword enthusiasts are probably going to leave comments like, well, you're saying thrusts are very effective. What about rapiers? Rapiers, they're not very good swords. They're Elizabethan self-defense weapons. I mean, there's a common misconception you can't cut with a rapier. You can. You just can't cut very well. And a rapier is designed for thrusting, and it's designed for human against human combat. So taking a rapier up against a horde of goblins is suicide. Now again, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 goblins. Okay, a rapier could very well be an effective weapon. but in very, very small groups, which you are not commonly going to see when you're fighting against goblins. Alright? But, in any case, what you need to remember is this. He wasn't using the proper weapon for the situation he was in. Now, if he had actually did some research, okay, he found out how goblins like to hide themselves, he found out how they work, how they think, how they act, all that good stuff, like Goblin Slayer does, alright, he would have been able to probably survive and keep the others alive longer than he did. Alright, so I've been rambling on about weapons and such. You're probably wanting to know what would be my pick of weaponry to go into a cave where I know I'm going to fight multiple opponents. And I have limited room and I have allies with me. First, I would pick armor that would be very well suited to this. Full plate armor, first of all, if I had the money. But let's say I'm a peasant adventurer who doesn't have a lot of money, who usually takes very low ranked quests. Alright, in that case, Gambeson or Chainmail, or both. If I couldn't afford the Chainmail, I would definitely try to afford to make Gambeson, afford to buy a suit of Gambeson, or even make my own Gambeson. But I would definitely have armor of some sort on. Cloth armor. I mean, goblins are not going to be able to bite through that very easily, and they definitely aren't going to be able to bite through Chainmail. But yeah, Chainmail armor and Gambeson or full plate. That would be my pick. Next, the type of weapon I would use. Now, Shadiversary has done a couple of videos on this, but in my opinion, the weapons I would choose would either be a Viking round shield or a Spartan round shield. Well, not really Spartan round shield, but I would pick some sort of small shield, like a Viking round shield, perhaps, or a heater shield in this instance. I mean, the heater shield is a lot thicker, it's a lot denser, but still, it's very good at doing what it's supposed to, and that's keeping sharp, pointy things from stabbing into you. Alright? And the Viking shield actually has more, I would say, tactical use in that situation, because it's a center grip shield, which means you could punch with the shield. You can even, what? Just a minute. You can even flip it to the side and stab with the shield. But yeah. Alright. So I pick a good shield and a short sword. That way I could swing it around without having to worry about losing it as much or worry about hurting the other people with me in my party. But Goblin Slayer, he does this very well. He knows how to slay goblins. He's been doing it for years. He's a hardened adventurer. He has a short shield. He has a small round shield, a short sword, and he knows how the goblins think and act. Which, if you do the research and you pick the weapon and armaments that are best suited for the quest, you will have a much better chance at surviving the quest and coming home. And I would like to discuss this further, but I have to go and bake some cookies with my grandmother for New Year's. So, until next time, Outlaw Samurai. This has been the Outlaw Samurai. Telling you, be safe, and don't do stupid shit with weapons, and watch Goblin Slayer. I'm out. May the blades be with you.